The warning signs. The holographic display flickered across the Mercenary Guild Hall, casting an eerie blue glow over countless battle-scarred faces. Zixthor, a 7-foot-tall Craxian warrior with obsidian scales and 4 muscular arms, studied the message with narrowed yellow eyes. His reputation as the most successful mercenary leader in 3 star systems had brought him countless lucrative offers, but this one was different. 10 million credits, he muttered, his voice a deep rumble that vibrated through the room. Per soldier. Per day. The younger mercenaries around him shifted eagerly, their various appendages clicking and whirring with excitement. The Vaxian twins, known for their synchronized combat style, exchanged glances through their crystalline eye clusters. Even the usually stoic Malgrave, a silicon-based warrior whose body could withstand plasma fire, leaned forward with interest. But the older veterans remained still. They knew better. "It's from humans," Zixthor continued, watching their reactions carefully. The eager movements stopped abruptly. The room fell silent except for the hum of life support systems and the distant clang of weapons training. "Commander," spoke up Richtel, his second in command, a serpentine silithan with scales that shifted colors with her mood. Currently, they were a wary orange. No one takes human contracts. Not anymore. Zixthor nodded slowly. He'd heard the stories, of course. Every mercenary had. Tales whispered in dark corners of space stations, shared over strong drinks in the seediest bars of the Outer Rim. Stories of the most feared warriors in the galaxy returning from human contracts, broken, traumatized, or not returning at all. "They're just another species," argued Vex, one of the younger recruits. His 6 limbs gestured emphatically. "How bad can they be? With that kind of money, we could retire after 1 mission." The veterans laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. Malgrave's rocky form scraped against his chair as he leaned back. "I knew Gorthan the Unbreakable," he said, his voice like grinding stones. "Survived the siege of Nexus Prime. Fought off an entire swarm Queensbrood single-handedly. Came back from a human contract after 3 days. Wouldn't speak for a month. When he did, all he said was never again." Zixthor raised a hand for silence. "We'll discuss this at the Guild Council. All senior members report to the Strategy Chamber in 1 hour." The Council Chamber was a testament to centuries of mercenary tradition. Trophies from 1,000 campaigns lined the walls. Energy weapons, alien skulls, fragments of destroyed ships. At the center stood a circular table made from the hull of a dreadnought, scared by countless strategy sessions. The 12 senior guild members took their places. Each represented a different species, a different fighting style, united by their profession and their survival instincts. Zixthor activated the central hologram, displaying the contract details. "The humans are offering unprecedented payment for a security detail," he began. "They claim it's a simple protection mission for a research facility on the edge of their space." "Simple?" scoffed Kralok, a 4-eyed Centauri whose species was known for their tactical genius. "Nothing involving humans is simple. They don't hire mercenaries for simple." "What do we actually know about human military operations?" Zixthor asked, genuinely curious. Despite humanity's relatively recent emergence on a galactic stage, concrete information about their military capabilities remained surprisingly scarce. Richtel's scales shifted to a deep purple, the color of grave concern. "I've compiled reports from the few who've returned from human contracts." She activated her personal datapad, projecting information into the center of the table. Pattern 1. Humans don't retreat, ever. They'll fight to the last soldier, even when the situation is hopeless. "Many species show bravery," Vex interjected. "Not like this," Richtel continued. "The Thorian incident. A human patrol of 12 soldiers encountered a Thorian warband of over 200. Instead of retreating, they held their position for 6 hours until reinforcements arrived. 3 survived. Pattern 2. They adapt faster than any known species. During the Kelvar campaign, Human forces faced an enemy that could phase through solid matter. Within 2 days, they'd developed countermeasures using modified mining equipment. The room grew increasingly quiet as Richtel continued through her list. Pattern 3. Humans formed emotional bonds with their equipment, naming vehicles and weapons, fighting harder to save machines than most species would fight for living comrades. Pattern 4. They possessed an inexplicable ability to function long after their bodies should have shut down from injury or exhaustion. And Pattern 5. Richtel concluded, her scales now almost black. They consider any situation a learning experience. Defeat doesn't discourage them. It motivates them. Zixthor studied the faces around the table. Even the most battle-hardened among them looked unsettled. These are just stories, he said, though without much conviction. Exaggerations, perhaps. I was there for one, said Malgrave quietly. The table turned to look at the ancient warrior. The siege of Outpost Gamma. We were hired to reinforce human defenders against a Skrull invasion. The humans were outnumbered 20-1. He paused, his crystalline eyes growing distant. When our lines broke, we retreated to the secondary positions as planned. The humans didn't. They grabbed whatever weapons they could find. Mining lasers, construction equipment, even improvised explosives from fuel cells. One human continued firing his weapon after losing an arm. Another used his damaged exosuit as a battering ram. Did they win? Vex asked, fascinated despite himself. Define win, Malgrave replied. The outpost was destroyed. 90% casualties. But the Skrull never tried to invade human space again. The council sat in contemplative silence. Finally, Zixthor spoke. I propose we send a delegation to meet with these humans. Gather intelligence. See for ourselves what we're dealing with. That's madness, Kralok objected. Every instinct tells us to stay away. Which is precisely why we should investigate, Zixthor countered. We're mercenaries. Information is as valuable as credits. If humans are truly this dangerous, we need to understand why. The vote was close, 7-5 in favor of sending a delegation. Zixthor would lead it personally, along with Richtel and 2 others. They would meet with the human contractors, tour their facility, and make a final decision about the contract. As the council dispersed, Richtel approached Zixthor. You know this is a mistake, she said, her scales flickering with concern. Probably, he agreed. But I've spent my entire career assessing threats and opportunities. Humans are clearly both. We need to understand which they are more of. 3 days later, their ship dropped out of hyperspace at the coordinates provided. The human station hung in space like a metallic spider, all angles and protruding arrays. It looked functional rather than aesthetic, built for purpose rather than impression. Mercenary vessel Shadowclaw, you are cleared for docking bay 7. Came a surprisingly cheerful human voice over the comm. Welcome to Research Station Oracle. Someone will meet you at the airlock. As they docked, Zixthor noticed something odd. The station's hull showed signs of recent combat, scorch marks, hatched breaches, melted armor plating. Yet the humans had described this as a research facility in a secure sector. The airlock cycled open, revealing their greeting party. A single human female stood there, wearing a crisp uniform with minimal decoration. She was smaller than any of them, with no visible weapons or armor. By all appearances, completely vulnerable. Yet something in her stance, in the direct way she met their eyes, made Zixthor's warrior instincts scream warnings. Commander Zixthor, she said, extending a hand in the human greeting gesture. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chen. Thank you for considering our offer. Zixthor carefully shook her hand, noting the strength in her grip despite her size. Colonel Chen, your station appears to have seen recent combat. She smiled, and somehow that expression was more unsettling than any threat display. Oh, that. Just a minor incident with some local pirates. Nothing we couldn't handle. Shall we begin the tour? As they followed her through the station's corridors, Zixthor noticed more signs of recent fighting. Hastily patched walls, cleaned but still visible blast marks, the lingering ozone smell of energy weapons. "If you don't mind me asking," Richtel said, her scales shifting to curious green, "why hire mercenaries if your forces are capable of handling such threats?" Chen glanced back, that same unsettling smile in place. "We believe in being prepared for all contingencies. Besides, we're about to undertake a project that requires specialized skills." They passed a training area where humans were conducting what Chen called routine exercises. Zixthor watched in fascination as soldiers ran an obstacle course that would challenge even his elite warriors. They moved with a fluid efficiency that spoke of countless hours of practice, their teamwork seamless. But it was their expressions that caught his attention. They weren't grim or determined. They were enjoying themselves, competing with each other, pushing their limits with what appeared to be genuine enthusiasm. "Your soldiers seem unusually motivated," he observed. Chen nodded. "Humans are competitive by nature. We've learned to channel that into productive training. Would you like to see our advanced facilities?" The tour continued, each new revelation adding to Zixthor's growing unease. The humans' medical bay could perform procedures that would be considered miracles by most species. Their weapons research lab was developing technologies that shouldn't be possible with their current scientific understanding. And everywhere, that same intense energy, the drive to push beyond limits. As they concluded the tour, Chen led them to a conference room. "So," she said, activating a holographic display, "let me brief you on the actual mission parameters." The display showed a region of space that made Zixthor's scales tighten with recognition. The Void Maelstrom, an area of space so dangerous that even the most advanced species avoided it. Gravitational anomalies, radiation storms, and worse things lurked in that cosmic graveyard. "You want us to escort a research team into the Maelstrom?" Richtel asked, her scales now showing alarm patterns. "Not exactly," Chen replied. "We want you to help us establish a permanent research station inside it." The room fell silent. Even by human standards, this was insanity. "The Maelstrom has claimed thousands of ships," Zixthor said carefully. "No one has ever successfully navigated it, let alone built anything there." Chen's smile widened. "Exactly. That's why we're so interested. Think of what we could learn, what we could discover. The scientific advances alone would be revolutionary." "It's a death sentence," Richtel stated flatly. "Possibly," Chen agreed cheerfully. "But what an opportunity. We've already sent 3 preliminary expeditions. We've learned so much from each failure." "How many survived?" Zixthor asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. "Oh, none from the first 2. But the 3rd expedition managed to transmit some fascinating data before we lost contact. We're confident the 4th attempt will be successful." The casual way she discussed the loss of entire expeditions sent chills through Zixthor's spine. This wasn't bravery or determination. This was something else entirely. "Colonel Chen," he said slowly, "I must ask, why are humans so willing to accept such losses? Most species would abandon such a project after the first disaster." She looked genuinely puzzled by the question. "But how else would we learn? Every failure teaches us something new. Every death brings us closer to success. That's how progress works." In that moment, Zixthor understood why alien mercenaries refused human contracts. It wasn't the danger. Mercenaries lived with danger. It wasn't the difficulty. They thrived on challenges. It was the fundamentally different way humans approached existence itself. They didn't just accept risk. They embraced it. They didn't just overcome obstacles. They sought them out. They didn't just survive. They insisted on thriving in conditions that would break other species. "I think," Zixthor said carefully, "we need some time to consider your offer." Chen nodded, still smiling. "Of course. Take all the time you need. We'll be here, preparing for the next expedition, with or without you." As they left the conference room, Sixth Thor knew his decision was already made. The credits were tempting, but no amount of money was worth joining a species that saw the impossible as merely an interesting challenge. The warning signs had been there all along. Now he understood why veterans spoke of humans in hushed tones, why the bravest warriors in the galaxy avoided human space. Humans weren't just dangerous. They were inexorable. And that terrified him more than any enemy he'd ever faced. The human experience. The return journey to the Shadow Claw felt longer than it should have. Sixth Thor's mind raced with the implications of what they'd witnessed. As the airlock sealed behind them, his team remained unnaturally quiet, each lost in their own thoughts about the human proposal. "Commander," Richtel finally broke the silence, her scales shifting through a spectrum of concerned colors. "We can't seriously be considering this contract." Sixth Thor didn't answer immediately. Instead, he moved to the observation port, watching the human station grow smaller as they pulled away. Something about Colonel Chen's demeanor continued to bother him. Not her casual discussion of casualties, but the genuine enthusiasm behind it. "I want to understand them better," he said finally. "Before we make our final decision, we need more data." "What more do we need?" Vex protested, his 6 limbs gesturing frantically. "They want us to fly into certain death." "Precisely," Sixth Thor replied. "And they're willing to pay a fortune for it. Why? What do they know that we don't?" The comm system chimed. "Shadowclaw, this is Colonel Chen. I forgot to mention, we're conducting a training exercise in Sector 7 tomorrow. You're welcome to observe if you're interested in seeing our methods firsthand." Sixth Thor exchanged glances with his team. This was an opportunity, though perhaps not the kind they wanted. "We accept your invitation, Colonel," he responded, ignoring Richtel's warning hiss. The next morning, they returned to the station. Chen met them wearing combat gear this time, though she still carried no visible weapons. Her uniform bore scorch marks and patches, evidence of frequent use. "Glad you could make it," she said brightly. "Today's exercise is what we call adaptive response training. You'll find it quite interesting." She led them to an observation deck overlooking a massive training arena. Below, human soldiers were assembling, checking equipment that looked cobbled together from various technologies. "The scenario is simple," Chen explained. 2 teams. One defends a position, the other attacks. The twist is that every 5 minutes, we change the parameters." "Change how?" Sixth Thor asked. Chen's smile turned mischievous. "You'll see." A klaxon sounded, and the exercise began. The defending team took positions behind makeshift barricades while the attackers advanced using standard military tactics. For the first few minutes, it resembled any military exercise Sixth Thor had witnessed. Then the lights went out. Not dimmed, completely extinguished. The arena plunged into absolute darkness. Most species would have called a halt, regrouped, waited for systems to be restored. The humans didn't even pause. Sixth Thor watched through his thermal vision as the defenders switched seamlessly to alternative targeting methods. The attackers adapted their approach, using sound and heat signatures to navigate. The battle continued without interruption. "Impressive," Richtel admitted grudgingly, "but hardly revolutionary." 5 minutes later, the gravity cut out. Again, no warning. Suddenly, both teams were floating, their carefully planned movements thrown into chaos. Equipment drifted away from reaching hands. Cover positions became meaningless. Yet within seconds, the humans were adapting. They used walls and ceiling as new reference points, propelled themselves with controlled bursts from their equipment, turned the 3-dimensional battlefield to their advantage. "How often do you train in zero gravity?" Sixth Thor asked. "This is their first time," Chen replied casually. The exercise continued, each change more dramatic than the last. The temperature dropped to near freezing. Electromagnetic interference jammed their communications, simulated toxic gas-filled portions of the arena. At one point, the floor itself began to dissolve beneath them. Each time, The humans adapted. Not perfectly. There were mistakes, confusion, moments of panic. But they never stopped fighting, never stopped thinking, never stopped trying new solutions. "This is impossible," Vex muttered. "No one can train for every contingency." "That's not the point," Thor realized aloud. "They're not training for specific scenarios. They're training to adapt to anything." Chen nodded approvingly. "Exactly. We can't predict what challenges we'll face, so we train our people to handle whatever comes. The scenario isn't important. The response is." As the exercise concluded, Thor noticed something else remarkable. Despite the intensity of the training, despite the bruises and burns visible on many participants, the humans were laughing, comparing notes, already discussing how to improve their performance. "Your soldiers seem to enjoy suffering," Rictal observed. "Not suffering," Chen corrected. "Challenge. Growth. Humans have a saying, 'What doesn't kill you makes you stronger.' We've built our entire civilization on that principle." She led them to the arena floor where the soldiers were conducting their debrief. Up close, the extent of their adaptation became even clearer. They'd modified equipment on the fly, created new tactics in real time, turned every obstacle into an opportunity. "Commander Thor," Chen called out, "would your team like to participate in the next exercise?" The offer caught him off guard. Around him, his team tensed. It was one thing to observe human madness, another to participate in it. "What would that involve?" he asked cautiously. "Standard integration drill. Your team works alongside ours. We simulate a joint operation scenario. See how well different species can cooperate under stress." Before Thor could respond, Vex stepped forward. "I'll do it," he declared, his youthful enthusiasm overriding his earlier fears. "Vex? Wait." Rictal began, but Chen was already calling for gear. "Standard integration drill. Your team works alongside ours. We simulate a joint operation scenario. See how well different species can cooperate under stress." Before Thor could respond, Vex stepped forward. "I'll do it," he declared, his youthful enthusiasm overriding his earlier fears. "Vex? Wait." Rictal began, but Chen was already calling for gear. "Excellent. We'll start simple. Basic hostile environment. Limited resources. Unknown enemy capabilities." What followed was the longest 3 hours of Thor's military career. He watched from the observation deck as Vex was integrated into a human squad, equipped with modified gear, and thrown into a scenario that would have qualified as a nightmare for most species. The environment shifted constantly. Temperatures fluctuated wildly. Gravity varied from crushing to non-existent. Simulated enemies appeared from impossible angles using impossible weapons. Resources dwindled, equipment failed, injuries mounted. And through it all, the humans kept pushing forward. More remarkably, they kept Vex alive, adapting their tactics to accommodate his abilities and limitations, teaching him their methods even as they fought. When the exercise finally ended, Vex emerged changed. His exoskeleton was cracked, his breathing labored, 2 of his limbs hung uselessly. But his eyes held something new. Understanding. "Commander," he gasped as medical teams rushed to assist him. "I see now. I see why they're so feared." Later, in the medical bay, as Vex received treatment for his numerous injuries, he elaborated. "It's not that they're stronger or faster or smarter," he explained, wincing as a medic worked on his damaged limb. "It's that they never stop. When something fails, they immediately try something else. When that fails, they try another approach. They don't waste time lamenting failure or fearing death. They just adapt." Thor nodded slowly. "And the contract? The Maelstrom mission?" Vex was quiet for a moment. "I understand now why no one returns from human contracts. It's not because they all die. It's because working with humans changes you, makes you see the universe differently, makes you question limits you always accepted as absolute." That evening, Chen invited them to a casual dinner with some of the station's officers. Zix-Thor accepted, curious to see humans in a social setting. The gathering was unlike any military function he'd attended. Officers who hours ago had been trying to kill each other in training now shared stories and jokes. They discussed their failures as eagerly as their successes, treating each mistake as a valuable lesson rather than a source of shame. "You seem surprised," Chen observed, noticing his expression. "Your culture is unusual," Zix-Thor admitted. "Most species maintain strict hierarchies, formal protocols." "Oh, we have those too," she assured him. "But we learned long ago that rigid thinking gets you killed. In combat, the best idea wins, regardless of rank. In exploration, curiosity matters more than protocol. In survival, adaptation beats tradition every time." As the evening progressed, Zix-Thor found himself drawn into conversations about human history, philosophy, and ambition. He learned about their early space program, built on technology so primitive it seemed suicidal, about their colonization efforts, pushing into environments that actively tried to kill them, about their research initiatives, probing questions that other species considered too dangerous to ask. "Why?" he finally asked Chen directly. "Why push so hard? Why take such risks?" She considered the question seriously. "Because that's what makes us human. We're not content with what is. We're driven to discover what could be. Every frontier conquered, every mystery solved, every limit broken. It's not just about the achievement. It's about proving that we can, even at the cost of lives." "Especially then," she replied softly. "Those who die pushing boundaries are our heroes. They show us what's possible, even in failure. Their sacrifice inspires others to go further, try harder, dream bigger." As the dinner wound down, Chen made her final pitch. "The maelstrom represents everything we've discussed tonight. It's dangerous, yes, probably deadly. But imagine what we might find there. Imagine what we might learn. And imagine being part of the team that finally conquers what everyone else deemed impossible." Zix-Thor looked around the room at the human officers. They weren't insane, he realized. They were something far more dangerous. They were rational beings who had simply decided that some things were worth dying for. And worse, they'd made that decision joyfully. "I need to discuss this with my team," he said finally. Chen nodded. "Of course. But remember, whether you join us or not, we're going. The only question is whether you want to be part of history." Back aboard the Shadowclaw, Zix-Thor called an emergency meeting. His entire command staff assembled, including a still-recovering Vex. "I've made my decision," he announced. "We're declining the contract." There were murmurs of relief, but also, surprisingly, some disappointment. "However," he continued, "I want this experience documented. Everything we've learned about humans, their methods, their psychology. It needs to be shared with the Guild." "Why?" Richtol asked. "To warn others." "No," Zix-Thor replied. "To explain. Humans aren't just another client species. They're a fundamental force of change in the galaxy. We need to understand them, not fear them." As his team dispersed to begin their reports, Zix-Thor returned to the observation port. The human station still hung in space, a beacon of ambition and madness. He knew they would attempt the Maelstrom mission. Some would die, but some might succeed. And if they did, they would change the galaxy's understanding of what was possible. That was the true danger of humans. Not their weapons or tactics, but their ability to make the impossible seem achievable, to make others question their own limits. And that was why alien mercenaries would continue to refuse human contracts. Not because they feared death, but because they feared becoming like humans, creatures who saw death as merely an inconvenient obstacle to overcome. The warning had been there all along. Now he understood it clearly. Humans didn't hire mercenaries to fight their battles. They hired them to witness their madness, to spread the legend, to show the galaxy what humanity was capable of. And that was the most terrifying recruitment strategy of all. The final contract. 2 weeks after declining the contract, Thor received another message from Colonel Chen. This time, it wasn't an offer, it was an invitation. "We're proceeding with the Maelstrom expedition," her recorded message stated. "Since you showed genuine interest in understanding our methods, I thought you might want to observe the launch. No obligations, just witness history in the making." Against his better judgment, Thor accepted. He told himself it was for research purposes, to complete his report on human military psychology. Deep down, he knew it was something else, a morbid curiosity to see just how far humans would go. The launch facility was unlike anything he'd seen before. Most species built their expedition ships in orbital yards, pristine and sterile. The humans had constructed theirs on the surface of a moon, exposed to cosmic radiation and micrometeorite impacts. "We build them tough from the start," Chen explained as she gave him a tour. "If they can't survive here, they won't survive the Maelstrom." The expedition ship itself defied conventional design. It looked less like a vessel and more like a collection of modules held together by determination and reinforced hope. Every surface was scared, every system redundant, every component built to be repaired with whatever materials might be available. "Meet the crew," Chen said, leading him to a gathering area. Thor expected to see hardened veterans, desperate individuals, or perhaps those with nothing to lose. Instead, he found scientists, engineers, and explorers, all volunteers, all eager, all fully aware of the risks. Dr. Maria Vasquez, Chen introduced, our lead physicist. She developed the theoretical framework for navigating gravitational anomalies. The woman smiled warmly. "Based on the data from our previous attempts, of course. Each failure taught us something crucial." James Chang, our chief engineer, he's designed systems that can be rebuilt using Maelstrom debris. "If we're going to die in there," Chang said cheerfully, "we might as well use the place that kills us to keep us alive a bit longer." The introductions continued. Each crew member had a specialty, a reason for volunteering, and an unsettling acceptance of their likely fate. What struck Thor most was their excitement. Not nervous energy, but genuine enthusiasm for what they were about to attempt. "You're all volunteers?" he asked, still struggling to understand. "Every single one," Chen confirmed. "We had over 10,000 applications for 40 positions." "But why?" The question burst from him before he could stop it. "You know the odds. You know what happened to the previous expeditions," Dr. Vasquez answered. "Because someone has to be first. Someone has to take that step into the unknown. And frankly, the chance to unravel the mysteries of the Maelstrom. I'd risk a dozen lives for that opportunity." "You mean your life," Thor corrected. "Same thing," she shrugged. "My life, a dozen lives. It's all just probability when you're talking about advancing human knowledge." As the launch preparations continued, Thor observed the crew's interactions. They weren't fatalistic or resigned. They joked, planned, debated theories, and made bets on what they'd find. They discussed contingencies for scenarios that would terrify most species into paralysis. What happens if the ship starts to break apart? He overheard one crew member ask. "Section-by-section evacuation to the core module," another replied. "We use the outer hull as ablative shielding. And if the core module fails, then we improvise, maybe use the gravitational eddies as a slingshot. Could be fun." Fun. They were discussing catastrophic failure scenarios as potentially fun. The day of the launch arrived. Thor stood in the observation center with various human officials and media representatives. The excitement was palpable. "Final systems check complete," announced the launch director. "Expedition Maelstrom 4 is go for departure." Chen joined Thor at the viewing window. "You know," she said quietly, "when we first started expanding into space, every launch was like this. Every mission could be our last. We've never lost that feeling. That mix of terror and wonder. Most species grow out of it," Thor observed. "Most species stop growing." she countered. They reach a comfortable level of technology, a safe zone of exploration, and they stop. They survive, but they don't truly live. The expedition ship's engines fired, a brilliant flare against the star-studded backdrop. As it pulled away from the moon's surface, Zixthor noticed something strange on the hull. Artwork, paintings, messages, symbols from various human cultures. Graffiti, he asked, confused. Testimonials, Chen corrected. Messages of hope, dreams, aspirations. If the ship is destroyed, we want whoever finds the wreckage to know who we were and why we tried. The ship accelerated toward the distant anomaly that marked the maelstrom's boundary. Long-range sensors tracked its progress as it approached the region where previous expeditions had met their end. Crossing the outer boundary now, reported the tracking officer. Telemetry nominal. They're adapting to the gravitational shifts. For the next several hours, Zixthor watched as the expedition pushed deeper into the maelstrom than any previous attempt. The crew's communications revealed their strategy. Not fighting the anomalies, but riding them, using the chaos itself as a navigational tool. It's working, Richtel said, her scales shifting to surprised yellow. They're actually making progress. Then, inevitably, something went wrong. A massive gravitational surge, larger than any previously recorded. The ship's signal fragmented, scattered across multiple frequencies. Hull breach in sections 3 through 7, came a calm voice through the static. Executing emergency protocols. They're losing the outer modules, Chen narrated, her expression tense but controlled. As planned, the core should hold. But the situation continued to deteriorate. System after system failed. The ship's trajectory became erratic. Yet through it all, the crew's communications remained focused, professional, almost excited. We're getting incredible data. Dr. Vasquez's voice crackled through interference. The gravitational patterns, they're not random. There's a structure here, a rhythm, if we can just. The transmission cut off. For several minutes, there was silence. Then, impossibly, a new signal. Weak, distorted, but unmistakable. This is Chang. Core module intact. We've lost propulsion and life support is failing, but we're stable, and you're not going to believe what we found. The message that followed changed everything. The crew had discovered that the maelstrom wasn't a natural phenomenon. It was artificial, a massive construct of unknown origin, a machine of incomprehensible purpose. We're inside some kind of structure, Chang reported. The gravitational anomalies. They're defense mechanisms, but there's something at the center, something incredible. The transmission included data packets, sensor readings, and images that defied explanation. Structures that shouldn't exist, energy patterns that violated known physics. Evidence of technology beyond anything in the known galaxy. Life support critical, came the final message. Estimate 30 minutes of breathable air. We're going to try reaching the central chamber. If this is our last transmission, know that it was worth it. Every death, every failure led to this moment. Humanity, continue the journey. Expedition 4, signing off. The control room fell silent. Then, slowly, applause began. It spread through the room, a celebration not just of survival or discovery, but of the human spirit itself. They knew, Zixthor said quietly to Chen. They knew they wouldn't return. Probably, she agreed. But look what they found. Look what they gave us. In the days that followed, the data from Expedition 4 revolutionized multiple fields of science. The revelation that the maelstrom was artificial sparked a new wave of research and exploration. Plans for Expedition 5 began immediately, incorporating lessons learned from all previous attempts. Zixthor returned to the guild with his completed report. He stood before the council, his fellow mercenaries waiting to hear his final conclusions. The humans offered us a contract, he began. We declined, and I believe that was the correct decision. Not because the mission was too dangerous, but because we fundamentally misunderstood its purpose. He activated the holographic display, showing images from the expedition. Humans don't hire mercenaries for protection or combat support. They don't need us for that. They hire us to witness, to spread their story, to show the galaxy what they're willing to sacrifice for knowledge, for progress, for the simple fact of going where no one has gone before. So we were right to refuse, Krolok stated. Yes, but not for the reasons we thought. We refused because we value survival above all else. Humans value discovery above survival. That's not madness. It's a different form of sanity. One that will eventually change the galaxy. The Council absorbed this in silence. Finally, Malgrave spoke. Your recommendation. Continue to decline human contracts, Zixthor said firmly. Not because they're too dangerous, but because they require a mindset we don't possess. Humans don't want mercenaries. They want converts to their cause. And that cause is nothing less than pushing the boundaries of what's possible. As the council meeting concluded, Zixthor added one final note to his report. The most dangerous thing about humans isn't their weapons or their tactics. It's their ability to make you question whether survival is truly the highest goal the species can aspire to. Months later, he received news that Expedition 5 had successfully established a permanent outpost within the Maelstrom. They'd named it Chung Station, in honor of the engineer who'd given his life for the discovery. The humans had turned a galactic death trap into a research facility. They'd made the impossible possible through sheer determination and acceptable losses. And in doing so, they'd shown the galaxy that the only true limits were the ones we imposed on ourselves. That was why alien mercenaries would continue to refuse human contracts. Not because they feared human madness, but because they feared it might be contagious. And once infected with the human perspective, there was no going back to seeing the universe as a place of limitations. The warning signs had always been there. Now they served as beacons, marking the boundaries between those who merely existed and those who truly lived. And somewhere in the depths of the Maelstrom, in a station built on sacrifice and determination, humans continued to push those boundaries ever further.